As the instructor for the course requested to know what I am wearing, I am professionally dressed in a blazer, a skirt, and pumps. Unequal Opportunity: Marginal Man Theory in American Education, presented by Rachel Johnson for the University of West Florida. In this presentation, I will cover the origins of the marginal man theory, including theorists Robert Ezra Park, Everett Stonequist, and Milton Goldberg. I will also discuss W.E.B. Du Bois and his concept of double consciousness and how that concept relates to marginalization. Then the presentation will explore theory constructs and show how the theory has been applied to existing literature. Finally, I will discuss a current issue in education and apply the marginal man theory as a theoretical framework to explore the impact of racial inequality in American education. American history tells us that slavery was abolished in 1865, but that was just the beginning of marginalization. In 1896, Congress upheld segregation, saying that the races were separate but equal. Marginal man theory originated in 1928, 63 years after emancipation, when American society was firmly entrenched in the Jim Crow laws era. Not only was segregation marginalizing Black citizens, but the so-called Black codes of the time dictated where, when, and how freed slaves could work and how much money they could make. Those codes were enacted in the Deep South, where ex-Confederate soldiers held jobs in law enforcement and the judicial system, ensuring that Black citizens would remain marginalized. Robert Ezra Park was a sociologist who wrote an essay titled Human Migration and the Marginal Man in 1928 for the American Journal of Sociology. He coined the term marginal man and defined the term as one whom fate has condemned to live in two societies and in two not merely different but antagonistic cultures. His student, Everett V. Stonequist, Professor Emeritus of Sociology at Skidmore College, further developed the theory in numerous works on race relations, including a book titled Marginal Man, which discussed transcultural experiences and the pressures felt by minority and ethnic group members in American society. In 1941, a sociologist named Milton Goldberg used the marginal man theory to further explain the American experience of being Jewish and renamed the term marginal culture, focusing on anti-Semitism in America. Prior to the origination of marginal man theory, W.E.B. Du Bois identified a phenomenon he called double consciousness to describe the experiences of the marginalized individual in his work titled The Souls of Black Folk. In the next slide, there will be an animation of the concept of double consciousness using the words of Du Bois to explicate what he called the unasked question.
Between me and the other world, there is ever an unasked question. Unasked by some through feelings of delicacy, by others through the difficulty of rightly framing it. Instead of saying directly, "How does it feel to be a problem?" they say, "I know an excellent colored man in my town," or "Do not these southern outrages make your blood boil?" At these I smile, or reduce the boiling to a simmer, as the occasion may require. To the real question, how does it feel to be a problem, I answer seldom a word. And yet being a problem is a strange experience. It dawned upon me with a certain suddenness that I was different from the others. shut out from their world by a vast veil. For the world I longed for and all its dazzling opportunities were theirs, not mine. Why did God make me an outcast and a stranger in mine own house? It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, this sense of always looking at one's self through the eyes of others. One feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro. Two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. The history of the American Negro is the history of this strife, this longing to attain self-conscious manhood, to merge his double self into a better and truer self. In the days of bondage, they thought to see in one divine event the end of all doubt and disappointment. Slavery was, indeed, the sum of all villainies, the cause of all sorrow, the root of all prejudice. Emancipation was the key to a promised land of sweeter beauty than ever stretched before the eyes of wearied Israelites. Years have passed away, 10, 20, 30, and yet, the freed man has not yet found in freedom his promised land. Merely a stern concrete test of the underlying principles of the Great Republic is the Negro problem. And the spiritual striving of the freedmen's sons is the travail of souls whose burden is almost beyond the measure of their strength, but who bear it in the name of an historic race, in the name of this, the land of their fathers' fathers, and in the name of human opportunity.
Constructs of the marginal man theory include racism and racial bias, social inequality, psychological marginality, conflicting cultural identities, and marginalization by the dominant group. What does the existing literature say about race and education when viewing through a theoretical lens of marginal man? There is a vast amount of existing literature that studies the concept of marginalization of African Americans, but a select few apply the marginal man theory as a theoretical framework. Researchers discuss the lack of opportunity existing for Black students in an educational system that has been desegregated for 65 years. The achievement gap between Black and white students has received much attention, yet there is still an educational crisis. Black and white students navigate a racialized educational terrain that provides cumulative advantages for whites and disadvantages for Blacks. There are structural, institutional, and symbolic inequalities that contribute to such educational inequality. Recent research examines the Black and white achievement gap in integrated, affluent suburban schools. This gap exists more than 50 years after the Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954, which emphasized creating educational equity through school desegregation. So what are the implications for the future of race and educational achievement? Research indicates that there is an implicit racial bias that exists in American public schools. Among the contemporary race issues in education, the disparity in discipline that has been recorded by researchers warrants further review. A researcher named Carla Monroe documented the causes of disproportionality in school discipline and made recommendations for change in her essay titled, "Why Are Bad Boys Always Black?" In a synopsis of her research findings, she claims that nationally, African American students are targeted for disciplinary action in the greatest numbers. According to quantitative reports, Black pupils are statistically 2 to 5 times more likely to be suspended than their white counterparts. Part of the problem is the suspensions are exclusionary, where they are removed from the classroom, removed from school. This exclusion has caused what researchers term the school-to-jail link, and the school-to-jail link demonstrates the impact of racial bias, leading researchers to conclude that exclusionary school discipline is a practice that is an antecedent to incarceration. Further research that applies the marginal man theory as a framework for studying disciplinary gaps in education are warranted.